Infosys provides world-class online IT training, staffing, and software testing solutions to customers worldwide. H2K Infosys, how we are different from our competitors. 100% job-oriented training, hands-on project work, cloud test lab, resume preparation and review, mock interviews, robust syllabus, one-time fee and lifetime access to classes, access to recorded sessions of live classes. H2K Infosys has won the trust of thousands of students worldwide. For a free demo class, visit us at h2kinfosys.com.
All right, so let me start up the recording also. Okay. All right, so how many folks? Yeah, a couple of folks are yet to join actually. Okay, so let's start now. So today the main topic is going to be an exception. What is an exception, and what is the use of an exception, and how do we use an exception? There are a couple of keywords which is present in exception which we are going to see in this course of action. Okay. Now coming on to exception, what is an exception? As you can see in this PPT, a Java exception is an object that describes an exceptional condition that has occurred in a piece of code. Okay, now what is that exceptional condition, which we are going to see it right away. And Java exception handling, it is basically handled via a couple of keywords or 5 keywords: try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. Okay, so we'll see all these keywords right now. And in the meantime, let me just tell you what is the hierarchy of an exception. These are the very few hierarchy which we will be seeing it at this point of time. Okay, but when we talk about your advanced Java courses, there are a lot of other hierarchies which are present. Okay, but everything drills down to one of the superclass. The way in Java, when we talk about a class, the supermost class of a class is an object class. Okay, in the same way, when I talk about an exception, throwable is the supermost class, and under that you have got error and exceptions. And under exception, you have got a runtime exception. There are a lot of other derived exceptions also. Depending on which all frameworks you use, you will be using those exceptions accordingly. I'll tell you about all these things in short, okay, so that you at least understand what it is, okay. And under throwable, we have got one more hierarchy, that is your error. Whenever there is a memory there is no memory at all, you'll get these kind of errors, and these errors we cannot even handle it by ourselves. Okay, so we'll even talk about these things. So on a higher end, we have got something like checked exception and unchecked exception. Okay, unchecked and checked exceptions, which we will even see that shortly. Okay, now the first thing, I have already sent it. I'll just tell the admin folks to send it across to you. Okay. Yeah, I just got a query that send this PPT. I have already sent this PPT to the admin folks. They'll send it back to you. Okay. All right. So now let us see what is an exception and why this exception has come into picture. Okay. So the very first thing is I'm going to create a package now. Exception. Okay. Now new class exception 1 example. Let's say exception 1. Okay. So the very basic thing, if you remember, we spoke about something like when we created an integer array, int I equals to let's say I'm just going to use it directly here, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so the size of my array is here only 3. Now I know if I say sys out and I try to access I of 0, I get the value of 12 here. Okay, now sometimes what happens, you have these kind of values dynamically, which is going to come up from some other external application. Okay, At that point of time, you directly add these values, whether it is a 1, 0, 1 or 2. So as you know, in this case, I have only three values in it. So either I have to say 0, 1 or 2. Okay. But what if I say 3 here? Right click, run as Java application. You get some sort of exceptions out here saying that array index out of bound exception. Okay. So this exception, if you can see, this basically comes under your runtime exception. So I'll even tell you what is a runtime exception, okay, and what is a compile time error and stuff and all. Okay. Now, if you can see out here, you have got an array index out of bound exception. Why do you get that? You get it because you're trying to access an element which is out of the range. Okay. Now, what is the concern? I mean, why is it something like I'm not able to catch this during a compile time itself? Okay. So again, there are a couple of things. One is you get some issues during runtime, you get some issues during compile time itself. Okay. Now, what is my objective of doing this over here? Right. Now, what am I trying to do here is I'm saying that access any of the values from this array. Okay. Let it be 1, 2, or 3. Okay. So either of the value, whether it is 0, 1, or 2. Okay, I don't care about any of these things. So my business functionality says that get any of the values from your array here, okay, and do some manipulations on that. So I'm going to say here int any value equals to. So I'm capturing this value in your any value, and on this any value I'm going to say here int final value equals to any value plus 10. Okay, so this is my kind of my requirement wherein the client says that you get any of the values which is present in your array and you try to take that value and add just 10 to that particular value. Okay, now I'm very well, I can just say sys out here and I'll just say final value out here. Okay, so I'm good right now. So if I right click run as Java application, I will get a values 24 because I'm trying to access this value, and for this value I'm just adding this. So ultimately I got this value 0, 1 and 2. Okay, but even my client says that my requirement comes in that if there are any issues, let's say suddenly in runtime you try to, if you remember in the previous classes, even we spoke about adding the arguments dynamically from your command line also. Okay, so the same thing, let's say I'm trying to access the third element out here. So if you can see here during compile time there is no issues at all, but if I right click run as Java application, you get something like array index out of bound exception. Okay, but my requirement is if you have any issues in this piece of code, okay, you give a default value to any value. Okay, so I say that if there are any issues, just say any value equals to 10. Okay, so this is my basic requirement here. So right click run as Java application. Okay, so ultimately what I want to do here is I do not want to stop the execution of the program, but here if you can see here, if we just put a breakpoint here, or let me just say sys out, this is your 1, this is your 2, this is your 3, this is your 4. Okay. Now if I run this, right click, run as Java application, I know this 1 and 2 are getting printed because till this piece of line, there is no issues with the code. The only issue which is happening is during runtime, that is your any value, because you're trying to access your third element out here. Okay, but still this is my important functionality wherein I'm actually doing some calculation, and this calculation is being used by somebody else. Okay, the value, I mean the final result is being used by somebody else. All right, now what do I need to do in order to come to this point or come to line number 15? In using this piece of code, okay, I sometime might come here, I sometime might not come here, because all depends on the value what you're passing it as an argument here. Okay, now what should I do in this case? I will put this piece of code in a try and catch block. Okay, we'll see how at the very beginning we are going to use a try and catch block in order to execute our program without any flaws. Okay, so what should I do here? I will just use a try and catch block. Okay, and use a catch. Here for now, let me say if you see this PPT, array index out of bound exception, array index out of bound exception, which is again extending your runtime exception, which is again extending your exception. So this is the hierarchy basically. We have spoken about a lot of hierarchies, right? When we spoke about a woman basically extends a human. So in that case, your array index out of bound exception extends your runtime exception. This in turn extends your exception. So as a result, I can use my superclass object or superclass reference in order to have my reference of my subclasses. So in this case, if you see, I'm going to use an exception out here. Okay, so I'm just going to say exception exp. Okay, and I'm just going to say sys out issue with your code. Okay, so when there is an issue with your code, I'm going to say here this any value. If I am trying to access this value inside this, I'm accessing some value inside this. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have this particular any value defined over here. Okay, and I'm just going to initialize this to 0 for now. All right, now why did I do this? Because if you say int I inside this itself, okay, I want to still access this value outside here, and if you can see, the block of code is inside. Okay, your int any value is inside your try and catch block. So this is a block of code. Okay, now this has to be initialized outside so that when you try to initialize some values in here, at the bottom you can still access the value here. Okay, now if you see here, int any value equals to 0. So in the try block, if you are saying you're giving some values here or assigning some extra values to any value, okay, that any value will be able to access in line number 18 also. Okay, but if you do it in this way, int and comment this out, this is of no use. I mean, it says any value cannot be resolved to a variable. Okay, so for that reason, I am going to declare it outside the block. So when I say outside the block, outside the curly braces out here, and I do my business functionality here. Okay, because I know that this piece of code might throw a exception for me. Now, what was my functionality? If you are trying to access your I of 3 and if there is any issues, then basically assign a default value to any value. So I'm going to say default value. I mean, the default value for an any value is 10 out here. So what did I do here? Very plain and simple. We introduced a try and a catch block. It says that try this. Okay, if there are any exceptions which are going to happen in your piece of code, come to the catch blocks so that I'm going to catch the exception. I can print a value or print a message to the output, and at last I'm just going to give the default value 10 to the any value. Okay, so right click, run as Java application. Now if you see here, all my piece of code executed. So 1 got executed, 2 got executed, and 3 got executed, 4 got executed, everything got executed. Now, but if you see here, even your issue with your code also got executed here. Okay, why? Because there is an exception when I'm trying to access my any value out here, it got some exception here. I'll show that in the debug mode right now. There's a question, what if you declare in both the places? It won't, because you're trying to declare two local variables out here. Okay, you have already declared a local variable here, and when you talk about local variable, any of the variable which are inside a method is local variable. Okay, so two variables cannot be having the same name. All right, so the concern here, now if I just say 2 here, okay, right click. Now if you can see at this point of time, I'm getting issue with your code. That means it is coming to the catch block. Okay, so right click, run as Java application. Now it is not even coming to the catch block. Reason, I'm trying to access my I of 2, which is your 0, 1 and 2. So everything is good with me. Okay. Now, let me put that in a debug mode right now. So let me, for that, putting the in the debug mode, I have to put a breakpoint. So right click, debug as Java application. Okay. So let me do an F6. So everything is fine here, and the value of any value is 14 right now. Okay, that is what I'm trying to access this one, and it did not even go to the catch block, and it came to this piece of code, and it executed fine. Okay, so let me make this as 4, debug as Java application, right? So F6. Now if you see here, still the value is 0 because that's what we have initialized it. And if you can see, there is an exception, which if I do an F6 right now, it basically went to the catch block. Okay, and in the catch block, I'm just initializing the value of any value to 10 here, and I'm proceeding further. All right. Now, usually what happens, you're not supposed to eat the exception. Now, what is an exception? I want to see that exception back. Okay. So here in this case, I'll just say exp dot print stack trace. Right. So what is going to happen right now? Right click, run as Java application. Now see here, it basically tells you in which line of code you have an exception. If you see, it says that exception1.java, it has got some issue with your line number 13. So what is line number 13? Any value, right? Now what it says, array index out of bound exception. You basically find out that, okay, there is some issues when I'm trying to access my value I, it says that array index out of bound exception. Okay. Yeah, so there's a question here. Can you explain try block one more time? Okay, so let me just at this point of time, I have no try and a catch block. It's my plain and simple code here, and I'm just saying any value. That means my main objective is to calculate some value, some final value. Now, how do I get the final value? Final value is any of the value from the array. For that reason, I have given this name of the variable as any value. Okay, so any value from the array. So if any value from array, all right, get that any value from the array, and okay, let me remove this. Okay, so I'm saying that get any value from the array and get that value and add 10 to it and get the final value. Okay, so irrespective of what value I get it from array.
Yeah, I'm not to interrupt you, but did we cover array yet or no?
We have covered array, right? In the previous classes.
I might have missed that part. Thank you.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right. Okay, so here my objective is I want to access any of the values from. We'll even talk about different examples also. I just for the starting point, I just wanted to tell you this because we have already seen these kind of issues when you try to access anything out of the array. So you basically get your array index out of bound exception. Okay. Now I want to basically have this kind of issue. Now if you see here, if I just try to say 2 here, and I know that this is 0, 1, and 2. And if I try to access this piece of code using I of 2, I'll be getting as 14 here. So this value will be 14 for me and everything goes fine for me. So this 14 plus 10 equals to 24. So the final value will be 24. Right click, run as Java application. So the final value is 24 and these are the just print statements. So let me just put a hyphen out here. Okay. So why did I put all these statements? Because I just wanted to show you during runtime. Okay, this got printed, this got printed, until here it came into picture, and even I'm good till here. So I'll say this as 4. Okay, so right click, run as Java application. Okay, so if you see everything went fine for me, let me drag and drop it here. Drag and drop it here. Okay, so everything went fine for me. Now this is my major major business functionality, wherein I'm doing a complex calculation. Okay, now this is a very small piece of code wherein you are having only line, let's say from line number 6 to 26, right? So in real time you'll be having bunch of code. Let's say it is about 500 lines of code or 600 lines of code. Okay, so in that case you never know at which point of time you might get any kind of exception. All right, now but you know that you should be understanding that, okay, what kind of exception I might get at what point of time. Okay, now as of now you know that you're trying to access an array of I, and you are getting some dynamic value here. As of now you have just given a hard coding value as 2 here, but you know you might get any kind of value, but your expected value is from 0, 1 or 2, that's all. Okay, but as a user they can add any of the numbers out here. Okay, so as of now if I say 5 here, so right click, run as Java application,
Avast virus database has been updated.
I basically get something array index out of bound exception. Okay, and if you can see only my line SOP1 and SOP2 got printed, and anything after that nothing got printed. Okay, not even 3, not even 4. Okay, now why it did not get printed? Because you're trying to access something here and it got an exception out here, right? Now your objective is to what? To say that if you're trying to access anything out of the bound, I still do not want to stop the execution of the complete program. I stop the execution of the program here. Okay, so for that reason you can basically put only this piece of code in a try and catch block. Okay, I'll just say here try and catch. So I'm saying that if there are any exception which occurred, catch that exception, okay, and give a default value to your any value. I'm just going to say if while accessing my I of 5 or the array I, if I get an exception, give a default value of 5 to any value from array. Okay, so right now if I run this application, if you see this is going to get printed, everything is going to be fine. Right click, run as Java application. So everything went fine, and at last I got, what is this, 5 plus 10 out here. Okay, now here if you see I have basically eaten up the exception. When I say eaten up the exception, I did not basically printed the trace out here. So in order to print the trace out here, I'll just say exp.print stack trace. Okay, so right now if I run this application, anyhow my application is going to run fine, but I can even see what kind of exception I got. Okay, so right click, run as Java application. Now see, I know that I'm trying to run my application, everything went fine, I even got the result, but I have basically got an array index out of bound exception. Okay, so this basically came up from exp.print stack trace. Is that clear to everyone? How do we modify for any error? Just print error and continue with next step. In some cases we may need. How do we modify for any error? Just print error and continue with. Saroja, can you just unmute yourself and speak out, please? Okay. So how do we modify for any errors? Just print error and continue with next step. In some cases we may need. Yeah, that's what we did, right? I mean, we modified the issue. I mean, we had an issue here, but still I apart from printing it out here, I even gave some default value to this array value for any value from array. Okay, so in order to handle this exception, right, I even handled this exception and I gave some values, and still I'm able to do my execution. Okay, all right, so this is a very small example right out here wherein we saw how to put our piece of code in a try and a catch block. Okay, now let us see one more example. New class. Let exception 2. You specified for I of 4. Yes, I specified I of 4. It doesn't matter if it is I of 4 or 5 because the size of the array is 3. So unless and until I say 0 or 1 or 2, it is good enough. Okay. So if you see here, if I say 0 out here, nothing is going to get printed here because it is not going to come to the catch block because everything is fine in my try block here. So right click, run as Java application. Okay. Is there a way to catch, make changes to the value and repeat the try block? In short, I loop the try block. Why do you want to loop the try block? If there is an exception, you want to handle an exception properly, right? Why do you want to loop the try block again? Does application will not fail at any condition with try? Yeah, application failed right here. So there's a question, does application will not fail at any condition with the try and a catch block? Yeah, application failed here. That's what we are trying to do here, right? So if you do not use this, right, if I do not use a try and a catch block right now, and if I access the value of 4 here, the application is going to fail here. Okay, that means no execution is going to happen after this line of code or this line of code. Okay, so in order for our application not to fail, we are putting this in a try and a catch block, and we are handling it accordingly. Okay.
No, what I meant was with the try and catch block, we are doing a workaround, right? So with having try and catch, is there a condition or is there a situation where even with try and catch, application will abort?
Even with a try and a catch block? Yes, I mean, as I said, we have got different hierarchy here. When we talk about exception, when we talk about errors also, in this case, in case of an error, your application is going to get aborted. Okay. Here, whenever we talk about any kind of exceptions, which we're going to see a couple of more exceptions, we have the complete handle to that exception. Okay. But when we talk about errors, let's say your memory is out, okay, out of memory error, we cannot even handle that kind of situation. Okay, your application is going to get aborted anyhow. All right. But for any kind of exception, we can easily, or we have the option to handle it accordingly. Okay.
Yeah. So exception, like with try and catch, we are gracefully handling, right? So there is no exception which will abort application, right? If we don't have try and catch, it will abort, right? Here we are gracefully, initializing whatever value we need.
Right. Yes, we are doing that. Was that a question or it was just a concern?
Just a statement.
Okay. All right. I thought it is just again a question to me. All right. So how can we catch an error when someone tries to access array greater than array length? Yeah, we did that here right away. Okay. So somebody is trying to access an array greater than that. So I'm trying to access it out here. So I'm able to catch it here because I know there is a kind of an exception which is going to be thrown. So I have added this in a try and a catch block. Okay. Okay, how do we catch an error when someone tries to access array greater than array length? For example, array size is 100. Yeah, it's all the same example out here. Okay. So this is just an array example. We'll talk about one more examples. Okay. So just stay tuned. You'll get a good thought of it as well. Okay. So the second exception which we are going to see right now is your arithmetic exception. So let me make this as so let me just set as 2. Okay. Now the same kind of concept here. Control V, yes. Okay. Okay. So what am I going to do right now? I can take up the same example. Okay, fine. Let me not. So I'll just say here int I equals to 10. Okay, and int division, or let's say I'm going to have a different method here, public void divide. Okay, and I'm just going to have one more method here. Let me just get the return type here, int, and let me have public int add. Okay, so I've got multiple functionalities out here. So here it is going to say divide int a comma int b, and the same here out here, int a comma int b. And I'm just going to say return a divided by b. Here I'm going to say return a plus b. Okay, and my functionality is, let me make this as static so that I don't have to create an instance of the class. Now my objective here, I would just want to say int int a int b equals to 5, and I just want to say int final value equals to, I'm just going to say divide of what, a comma b plus add a comma b. Okay, so this is my statement right now, and I just this out and everything went fine. Final value. So I'm going to get divided by, so 10 divided by 2, this is 2, and this is going to be 15, so 2 plus 15, 17, right? So right click, run as Java application, I got the result as 17. Okay, and somewhere your piece of code is hidden. As I said in the previous class, somebody has already implemented this piece of code, and you are good now. I mean, you're good to use these methods, okay? And you don't have to implement this. So let's say this piece of code is hidden to you.
H2K Infosys provides world-class online IT training, staffing, and software testing solutions to customers worldwide. H2K Infosys, how we are different from our competitors. 100% job-oriented training, hands-on project work, cloud test lab, resume preparation and review, mock interviews, robust syllabus, one-time fee and lifetime access to classes, access to recorded sessions of live classes. H2K Infosys has won the trust of thousands of students worldwide. For a free demo class, visit us at h2kinfosys.com.